I'd been planning our Thailand trip for months. It was supposed to be our reward, a celebration of finally paying off the last of our debts, of surviving 3 years of relentless work schedules. I wanted sunsets on Phi Phi Island, quiet mornings with mango sticky rice, and maybe even a rekindling of the spark that had faded in the grind of everyday life. I remember the moment we landed in Bangkok. The heavy, humid air hit us like a wall as soon as the airport doors slid open. My wife, Lena, was practically glowing, that kind of restless excitement she always got when surrounded by something new. She clung to my arm as we climbed into a taxi, pointing out neon signs and night markets through the window. The first 2 days were perfect. Street food stalls, golden temples, and longboat rides along the Chao Phraya River. We laughed more than we had in months. But on the third night, something shifted. We'd just finished dinner at a rooftop bar overlooking the city when she told me she was too tired to go to the night market with me. Instead, she suggested I go alone, so you can take pictures of all the stuff you love. She even gave me a little kiss on the cheek and told me to enjoy myself. It sounded harmless. Thoughtful, even. But when I came back to our hotel room around midnight, she wasn't there. No text. No note. Just an untouched bed and the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air. At first, I brushed it off, maybe she'd gone downstairs for a drink or decided to explore after all. But as the minutes dragged into hours, my chest started to tighten. I tried calling her. No answer. I checked the hotel bar. Nothing. It wasn't until nearly 3 a.m. that she walked in, hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed like she'd been running, or like she'd been somewhere she shouldn't have been. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. She froze for just a second before giving me a small smile. "Oh, I met some people downstairs, and we went to this little club. You wouldn't have liked it. Too loud." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as she slipped into the shower, I noticed something on her wrist, a bright, fluorescent wristband, the kind you only get from certain nightclubs in Bangkok. Clubs known for other things. And that's when the first crack in the perfect trip appeared. The next morning, she was all sunshine and small talk, acting like nothing had happened. We flew from Bangkok to Krabi, where we'd booked 3 nights at a beachfront resort. Palm trees swayed, long-tail boats drifted lazily on turquoise water. It was exactly the escape I'd imagined. But I couldn't stop seeing that fluorescent wristband in my head. On our second night there, I woke up around 1 a.m., to the sound of her laughing softly into her phone out on the balcony. I stayed still, eyes half closed, listening. "Yes, of course I want to see you again," she whispered, her voice playful, almost breathless. "Tomorrow night?" "Yeah. I'll make something up." I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The next day, she told me she'd booked a spa night for herself at another hotel in Ao Nang, claiming ours was fully booked. "It'll be nice for you to have some time alone," she said, her tone light and practiced. I smiled and nodded, but inside, something in me had gone cold. By mid-afternoon, she was gone. A couple hours later, I couldn't resist. I hailed a tuk-tuk and followed the address she'd left on a scrap of paper, not a spa, but a luxury adults-only beach club. Live DJs, candlelit cabanas, private infinity pools, and a reputation for being the kind of place where vacation flings are practically expected. I waited, hidden behind a row of palm trees, until I saw her. She wasn't alone. A tall man, tan skin, wearing a loose white shirt and linen pants, had his arm around her waist. They laughed together as they walked toward the water, barefoot, her head leaning against his shoulder like she belonged there. I'd brought my phone with the vague intention of taking a photo, but I didn't lift it. My hands were shaking too badly. She glanced up once, scanning the crowd, and for a split second, her eyes caught mine. The look on her face wasn't surprise. It was fear. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Her smile faltered, but she didn't come over. Instead, she turned quickly to the man beside her, said something I couldn't hear, and they both walked toward one of the private cabanas, disappearing behind a flowing white curtain. I followed. Slowly. Carefully. The closer I got, the more I could hear, the thump of deep bass from the DJ, the clink of ice in glasses, and her voice, low but unmistakable. I told him I was at a spa, she said, laughing nervously. You worry too much, the man replied, his accent vaguely European. He's probably back at the hotel asleep. When I reached the edge of the cabana, the sheer curtain was just thin enough to see through. She was sitting cross-legged on the cushioned lounge, facing him, a cocktail in her hand. His knee rested against hers, and he was tracing small circles on her leg with his fingers like he'd done it 100 times before. It wasn't the touch that broke me. It was the look she gave him, that unguarded, soft-eyed gaze she used to give me, back when we were still us. I stepped inside without a word. She jumped, her drink sloshing onto the cushion. The man turned, confusion flickering into discomfort. What the hell are you doing here? She asked, voice trembling but edged with defiance. I could ask you the same thing, I said, my tone calm in a way that didn't feel like my own. Spa night, right? Is this the massage part, or the facial? Her lips parted, but no words came out. The man stood, holding up a hand. Look, I don't want trouble. Then leave, I cut him off. Right now. He hesitated, glanced at her, then at me, and finally walked past me without another word. Now it was just the two of us, the sound of the waves muffled under the pounding of my heartbeat. You followed me, she said finally, as if that were the worst sin committed tonight. No, I said, stepping closer. I just didn't want to miss the moment I stopped being your fool. Her face went pale, and for the first time, she had nothing to say. She finally stood up from the lounge, brushing sand from her legs like the movement might buy her time to think. This isn't what it looks like, she said, the oldest line in the book, delivered with a shaky laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Oh. I stepped closer. Because it looks exactly like you lied to me so you could meet another man on a beach in Thailand. She flinched, her gaze darting to the empty entrance of the cabana where he'd left moments ago. I met him at the hotel bar last night, she blurted out. We just clicked. But it's harmless. Just talking. Just talking, I repeated, my voice low. Is that what you call holding his hand? Letting him touch you like you've been together for weeks? Her lips pressed into a thin line. You don't understand. You've been distant. Ever since we started planning this trip, you've been stressed, distracted. Planning this trip, I said, cutting her off. The one I booked and paid for so you could use it as your personal dating app. Her eyes welled up, but I'd stopped believing her tears long ago. I made a mistake, she whispered. I was just caught up in the moment. It didn't mean anything. Does it look like nothing to me, I said, glancing at the indented cushions where they'd been sitting shoulder to shoulder, her glass still sweating in the heat. You've been lying since Bangkok, haven't you? She swallowed hard but didn't answer. The bass from the DJ booth outside thumped like a second heartbeat, and for a second, we were just two shadows in a white-draped tent, the rest of the world moving on without us. I turned to leave. We're done here, I said. And when we get back home, we're done for good. Her voice followed me out into the warm night air, trembling and desperate. Please, don't do this here. But the thing was, she had already done it here. I didn't speak to her for the rest of the night. We rode back to the hotel in separate tuk-tuks. I watched her reflection in the side mirror, arms crossed, staring anywhere but at me, like she was the one who'd been wronged. When we got to the lobby, she tried to walk beside me, but I stepped ahead, swiped the key card, and closed the room door in her face. She knocked once, then twice, before the sound faded. I imagined her going to his room instead. Maybe that's exactly what she did. The next morning, I went down to breakfast alone. The buffet overlooked the sea, and the staff greeted me with the same polite warmth they always had, completely unaware that our marriage had just snapped in half. Halfway through my coffee, I saw her enter. She scanned the room, spotted me, and froze. She wasn't with him. In fact, she looked lost. She walked over slowly, pulling out the chair across from mine. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "You can talk," I said, not looking up from my plate. She took a deep breath. He left. Packed up this morning and took the first boat to Phuket. Didn't even say goodbye. I met her eyes then, just for a second. She looked smaller somehow, the confident glow from the night before gone. "Guess that's what happens when you build something on lies," I said. Her voice cracked. "I don't want him. I want you." I almost laughed, but it came out more like a sigh. "You had me. And you threw me away for a stranger on a beach." She reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. The clink of silverware and the crash of waves filled the silence between us until she finally stood and walked away. For the first time in days, I actually enjoyed the rest of my coffee. The last 2 days of the trip passed like a slow-motion funeral. We still shared the same hotel room, mostly because I didn't want to spend another baht on her, but it might as well have been a prison cell with an invisible wall down the middle. She stayed on her side, scrolling her phone in silence. I stayed on mine, pretending to read while counting down the hours until departure. On the morning of our flight home, we didn't speak at all. At the airport check-in counter, the attendant smiled brightly and asked if we wanted to sit together. I didn't hesitate. "No. Separate seats, please." She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see it sinking in that this wasn't just some fight we'd get over. During the layover in Doha, she tried again. We were sitting at opposite ends of the gate when she walked over and sat beside me. "Can we at least talk when we get home?" she asked. "You can talk to my lawyer," I said, not even glancing away from the departures board. She blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry in public. "You're just going to throw away everything we have?" I turned to her finally, meeting her gaze with the kind of calm that only comes when the decision is already made. "No. You threw it away in Bangkok. And again in Krabi. I'm just finishing the paperwork." The flight boarding call came, and we went our separate ways down the jet bridge. That was the last time we ever sat side by side as husband and wife. We landed just after sunrise. I didn't wait for her at baggage claim, I grabbed my suitcase and walked straight to the taxi queue. By the time she emerged from customs, I was already gone. The ride home felt strange. Everything was exactly as we'd left it, yet it all felt different, like the air inside the house had changed. I unpacked only my essentials, then went straight to the hardware store. By noon, the locks were changed. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with the first message. "Lena, where are you? My key isn't working." I ignored it. 5 minutes later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a mix of confusion and anger. "What's going on? Are you seriously locking me out after one mistake? Open the door. We need to talk." But there was no "we" anymore. That afternoon, I called a lawyer I'd found online during our flight home. We set an appointment for the next morning. He told me to gather everything, texts, receipts, even photos from the trip. By evening, I had a neat little folder ready, proof of the affair in 2 cities, and proof she'd lied about where she was. Around 9 p.m., there was loud knocking at the door. "Please," she said through the wood, her voice quieter now. "I'm sorry. I made a stupid mistake. I love you." I leaned against the door for a moment, listening. She sounded small, almost childlike, the same tone she'd used to charm her way out of little arguments before. But now, it just made me feel nothing. You should call someone else, I said finally. Maybe the guy from the beach. There was silence on the other side, then the sound of her footsteps fading away. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer in his glass-walled office, the folder of evidence between us. He flipped through it slowly, occasionally raising an eyebrow but never asking for clarification. The pictures from Krabi, the hotel wristband from Bangkok, the texts I'd screenshotted, it was all there. This is pretty cut and dry, he said finally, leaning back in his chair. Given the circumstances, I can push for a clean split with minimal loss on your side. Especially since the house and accounts are in your name. It felt strange hearing someone talk about my marriage like it was a business deal. But maybe that's all it was by the end, a contract she'd broken. By the time I left his office, the first legal papers were already in motion. That afternoon, her campaign began. It started with texts. Lena, I know I hurt you, but please, don't let one mistake erase everything we had. Lena, can we just talk? Just once. Lena, you're being cold, and it's killing me. When I didn't answer, she escalated. She showed up at my workplace 3 days later, standing in the lobby with that wide-eyed look she used to wear when she needed something. The receptionist buzzed me, but I told her I wasn't available. I could see Lena from the glass wall of my office, craning her neck, hoping to catch my eye. She stayed for almost 20 minutes before walking out, her shoulders slumped. 2 nights later, she left a note under my door, I'm not perfect, but I'm yours. Please don't throw us away. I left it on the kitchen counter for a week before finally tossing it in the trash, unopened. Every attempt she made, every call, every knock, every tear-stained letter, only confirmed one thing, she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she'd lost the safety net she thought would always be there. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after I'd changed the locks. I was at a small cafe downtown, sipping an iced coffee and reading, when I felt that prickling sensation, the one you get when someone is watching you. I looked up, and there she was, standing just inside the door. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She walked straight over to my table. Can we talk? She asked, not caring that the cafe was half full. I didn't answer right away. She took the seat across from me, ignoring the fact that I hadn't invited her. I can't sleep, she said quietly. I can't eat. I don't know how to fix this, but I need to try. You can't fix it, I said, closing my book. And you're not trying to fix what you did. You're trying to fix the fact that you got caught. Her voice rose slightly. That's not fair. Neither is cheating on your husband in another country and then lying about it for days. A couple at the next table glanced over. She noticed, too, and lowered her voice again. I miss you. I miss us. Can we start over? I leaned forward, my tone low and steady. There is no us. There's me, moving on, and you, dealing with the consequences of your choices. Her eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. She sat there a moment longer, then finally stood. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I already have, I said, picking up my book again. Forgiveness just doesn't mean you get to come back. She left without another word, and I felt the tension in my chest ease for the first time in weeks. After that day in the cafe, the messages slowed. First it was once every few days, then once a week, and finally, nothing. No calls, no knocks on the door, no notes slipped under it. The quiet was almost unnerving at first. I kept half expecting her to show up again, to try one last grand gesture. But she didn't. It was as if she'd finally realized there was no angle left to play. Friends told me they'd seen her around town once or twice, alone, head down, moving quickly. One even said she'd quit her job, maybe to avoid running into anyone who knew the truth. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Instead, I started filling my days with other things. Early morning runs. Cooking for myself again. Calling friends I hadn't spoken to in years because I'd been too wrapped up in our marriage. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, like it had been holding its breath until she left. One evening, as the sun was setting, I sat out on the back porch with a beer and thought about Thailand. Not the betrayal, but the moments before it, the longboat rides, the smell of street food, the sound of waves against the shore. Those were still mine. She didn't get to take them. The last time we spoke was in a small conference room at my lawyer's office. The divorce papers were on the table, neatly stacked, a pen resting on top. She walked in wearing a simple black dress, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Before I sign," she began, her voice small, "I just want to say. I never stopped loving you." I let the silence hang there for a moment. "You might have loved me," I said finally, "but you didn't respect me. And without that, love doesn't mean much." Her jaw tightened. I could see she wanted to argue, to rewrite what happened. But there was nothing left to rewrite, the truth was already etched into every detail of that trip. "This isn't what I wanted," she whispered. "Neither was Thailand," I replied. For a second, I thought she might walk out. Instead, she sat down, picked up the pen, and signed her name. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was the cleanest break I'd ever heard. When it was over, she slid the papers back to my lawyer and stood without looking at me. At the door, she paused. "Goodbye." I didn't answer. A week later, the divorce was finalized. I went home, poured myself a drink, and sat on the porch as the evening light faded. For the first time since the trip, I didn't feel like a man who'd been betrayed. I felt like a man who'd walked out of the fire carrying only what mattered, my dignity, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I'd never let someone like her back into my life again. The chapter was closed. And this time, it was me who locked the door.